Hey guys, welcome to another video, Purple Political Talk here, and today we're going to be talking about the 2020 Senate elections that will be held concurrently with the presidential elections on November 3rd, 2020. So right now, these races are changing by the day. Some of these races are becoming more Democrat, some more Republican. Events nationwide have definitely been changing these races, and that's why it's important to update on these races. So today we're gonna fill in the map, discuss all this. But before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. So currently, these races are very, very, very close in some states, and others not so much. I will say the following though. The Democratic Party has a huge advantage when it comes to the US Senate. Not because of the seats they're projected to win or anything, but going in, it's going to be a lot easier for them because they have a lot less seats to defend. And if we know anything from recent political history, is that the more seats you defend in Congress, the more chances are that you're losing, or you'll lose some seats. We saw that in 2018. The Democrats lost a net of one seat, actually, I think it was, but they lost three seats. Three seats in Missouri, Indiana, and North Dakota. And honestly, we might see something similar, but for the Republicans this time around. And I mean, right now, while also filling the Republican safe states, the Republicans don't have as many solidified states where they could completely 100% count on a victory, because realistically, a lot of these races are narrowing down. And in states where the Republicans should have safe margins, if we follow what they're winning by in the presidential levels. And I mean, right now, why are the Republicans lacking in some support in some of these Senate races? One, some races they just shows very bad candidates, or two, the energy is on the side of the Democrats, at least when it comes to the U.S. Senate, because we're seeing a lot of races that the Democrats have a higher chance of carrying because they're running very strong candidates. That's something the Republicans didn't do. They also failed to run candidates in certain areas of the country, like New Mexico and Virginia, which could have been contested states, but they decided not to. And this Congress, as it is somewhat close. The Democrats don't have to pick up that much to win the Senate. So we have a safe states filled in, and we have 39 Republicans, 43 Democrats. Now we're going to fill in the likely, lean, and tilt states to find out who I think is going to win the Senate majority. So let's begin by talking about the likely states for the Democrats. Like I was saying, the Democrats also have somewhat of an advantage nationwide when it comes to the Senate, and it shows with the amount of likely races. A lot of these races could have been lean Democrat, tilt Democrat, even lean GOP. But I think at this point, just of the way how the races are going, these candidates are campaigning. Those races are completely kind of a little bit out the window for the GOP a little bit. So right now, I would say that there's 5 races that I would classify under the likely column for the Democratic Party. Those would be the state of Arizona, where they're running Mark Kelly, a very strong candidate. Compare Mark Kelly to a very unpopular incumbent senator, Martha McSally, who really hasn't won an election, and she got appointed to her seat, so she hasn't won a statewide election, and she was actually rejected by the voters in 2018. I think she's going to get rejected again by the voters. And I think Mark Kelly's doing exceptionally well, polling at about 4 to 5%. I think he will be able to push it over a little bit and get over 5% into the likely margin, which will be a big victory for the Democrats in Arizona, as not only would this be an extra seat for them, but the first time in a very long time that 2 Democrats have sat together in the Senate from the state of Arizona. In the state of Colorado, we have a very interesting race here. We have a former very popular governor in John Hickenlooper. He ran for president in 2020. He dropped out early on. And you have a Cory Gardner who's not so popular. So what's the problem here? Cory Gardner is a Republican in a considerably blue state. Not only that, but Cory Gardner also votes with the Republican Party much more than the party or that his state wants him to, according to recent polling data and recent election numbers. So right now, just considering the fact that imagine this race was actually close to begin with, and Cory Gardner being a Republican didn't matter. He was still running against a popular governor, so a very strong candidate choice in part of the Democrats in Colorado. That's what might solidify this race and realistically give it to them by around 5%. I think honestly it's going to be very hard for Cory Gardner to hold on at this point. And remember, the demographics nationwide are changing. And honestly, the Republican Party of 2010 appealed to the suburban voters. Now that appeal has kind of gone split down the middle, which gives the Democrats a higher chance of winning some of these statewide races. And we're seeing a big surge for the Republicans in the presidential level. However, I don't think that correlates right now to the Senate map, at least for the information we have now. Moving on to Minnesota and Michigan, I would say these are two states that are pretty awfully similar when it comes to their Senate races. Here we have Tina Smith, current incumbent from the state of Minnesota, and out of Michigan we have Gary Peters. Both candidates are going to have a challenge in the Senate races. It's not going to be the hardest challenge I think they're ever going to face, at least campaign-wise. I mean, maybe Gary Peters more than Tina Smith, but in Tina Smith's case, I think she has this race pretty much wrapped up. She has a Republican opponent, but there is some growth for the Republicans, but since she is somewhat more on the moderate side of Democrats, I think Tina Smith would probably win here by a substantial margin of about 6 to 7%. While Gary Peters in the state of Michigan, it's a little bit questionable right now. I really consider putting this in the lean margin. However, right now, since Gary Peters is leading in polls, but his challenger is a very, very strong challenge and part of the Republicans. I would say John James, the challenger, is one of the best candidate choices for the Republicans nationwide. I think the Republicans do have a chance at this race. However, as of recent polling and this general sentiment for a lot of the Democratic Party in Michigan, I think currently Gary Peters is destined for a win, maybe even by 5% or more. Last but not least, we have the state of New Hampshire in the Democratic likely column. We have Jeanne Shaheen. She was a former governor. She's an incumbent senator. She's been in the Senate for a couple years now. She's become very popular. And considering that her opponents aren't the strongest Republican opponent for her, I think at this point, Jeanne Shaheen will probably win this race and win it by a substantial margin at that. So after we filled in the Democratic likely states, we're at 48 Democrats and 39 Republicans, which again shows us that the Republicans are very far behind when it comes to the Senate map. Although they do have a lot of likely races, in my opinion. At this point, I would say the Republicans have likely races in the state of Alaska, Kansas, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia at large, South Carolina, Kentucky, and those are all the races. So the Republicans do have a lot of likely races because these are races where the Democratic challengers are very strong candidates and they're able to push in those margins. So these margins, instead of being safe in most of the states that are currently likely for the Republican, they're unlikely, so around 5 to 15%. And each state has their own independent reason, and they're somewhat similar. But again, the situation varies by state. For example, in the state of Alaska, we have Dan Sullivan, current incumbent to the United States Senate. He beat Mark Begich in 2014. He's now running against Al Gross, the Democratic challenger, who is running an exceptionally strong campaign. In the state of Alaska, currently it's mostly made up of liberal Republicans, and a lot of third-party vote, as well as the Democrats. So what is Al Gross doing? He's getting the independent vote. He's getting some third-party vote that does not want to vote Republican. And he's bringing them over to their side. So right now, I mean, it's going to be a more closer race than we've seen in previous years. But still, I think that Dan Sullivan, he has a pretty solid chance of winning. Al Gross could probably pull off an upset, but it would be a true upset. And I think honestly, right now, Dan Sullivan is winning by around maybe 5 to 10%, anywhere in that range. And yeah, in the state of Kansas, we have Barbara Bollier going against Roger Marshall. So a lot of people might be saying right now, Purple, wouldn't Kansas be safe because it's not Chris Kobach against Barbara Bollier? Well, no, because in reality, in Kansas, even though Barbara Bollier is no longer running against Chris Kobach, we still have a very interesting race here. And we also have a race where, honestly, Barbara Bollier has gained a lot of support statewide, which again, already gives her somewhat of an edge. And I think honestly at this point in time, for Barbara Bollier, it's going to be hard to win, at least harder to win than against Kobach. However, Roger Marshall is a very strong candidate. I think he's going to win by 10 to 15%. However, I mean, I think Barbara Bollier could narrow down the margin a little bit. Going on to the state of Texas, we have John Cornyn, current incumbent, going against MJ Heger, the Democratic challenger. And I think at this point, John Cornyn has this race pretty much solidified. I think it'll be in the likely margin because there's still going to be a lot of Democratic turnout due to the presidential election. However, when it comes to this race, I think a lot of people would rather vote for John Cornyn than MJ Heger, and for one reason. A lot of people are saying that the Senate race could flip because of MJ Heger. She's a Democrat, and they're increasing. And you're right, Democrats are increasing their presence in Texas, but she is no Beto or work. I mean, although she can campaign and everything, she's not going to bring out Beto or work margins. And at the senatorial level, you need a lot of those different things because you're focusing on the states. John Cornyn has been there for a while. He should be able to win here, I would say, by around 10 to 15%. I think, like, honestly, Beto should have ran for Senate again, and the Democrats would have had a higher chance at this seat, especially considering that John Cornyn is actually more unpopular than Ted Cruz. So, I mean, I think the race could have been very interesting if Beto had ran. So going on now to the state of Kentucky, home state of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. So this is his race, and honestly, this race is always close because he's been in the establishment for almost 30 years now, almost 40 actually, 40 years, nearing 40 years. We have Mitch McConnell, who's been there for a long time. He's very unpopular amongst his base. Not most people in Kentucky, most of them do not like Mitch McConnell. Still, here's the thing. They're going to vote for Mitch McConnell because they don't like the Democratic option. I think the Democrats running Amy McGrath was a risk they took, but it ends up being that a lot of the Democrats that were excited to vote for the Democrat and try to beat Mitch McConnell are kind of giving up because she's essentially another Trump supporter in their eyes. So it's kind of like a Bernie bro movement that people that were supporting Charles Booker, they look at Amy McGrath and they see a Trump supporter. So I think that really affected her chances at the Senate in the state of Kentucky. So I think at this point, Mitch McConnell's probably going to win by 10 to 15%. But again, like most of his races in the past, it's going to be close. Now going on to the state of Mississippi, here we have Cindy Hyde-Smith going against Mike Epstein. And honestly, this race is not one of the more talked about races. However, it will definitely be more competitive than people think. Cindy Hyde-Smith, as a reminder for you guys, she only won her Senate race actually against Mark Epstein by only around a margin of 10% in the state of Mississippi. Considering the African American turnout will be high during this election, I could honestly say that at this point in time, the margins could definitely squeeze a little bit. I think it's going to be a similar margin to what we saw in 2018 with Mike Epstein winning by around or losing it by around 8%. We have Cindy Hyde-Smith still winning the Republican by around 8 percentage points. Going on to the state of Alabama, I would say one of the very few flips for the Republicans, at least when it comes to the Senate level. Here we have Doug Jones, who is a Democrat in a red state, and he's well liked in the state. However, just because he's a Democrat, that's probably going to lose him re-election. And considering the candidate the Republican ran, that is a candidate that could really push out the votes. He was a former college football coach, very popular in the state, and I think honestly at this point, Tuppy Tuberville will probably go on here and win this race and beat Doug Jones by, I would say, 6 to 7%. I would say Doug Jones could get some support and hold on to some of the Republicans that voted for him against Roy Moore. However, other than like those voters that stay, a lot of the Republicans that did not end up voting for Roy Moore in the runoff in the Alabama Senate race, essentially, I think those voters are just going to go back to Tuppy Tuberville. Going on to the last two races in the likely column for the Republican Party, we have the state of Georgia and we have the state of South Carolina. In the state of South Carolina, I would like to compare this race a little bit to the state of Kentucky in the sense that we have someone that's establishment very high up in the Senate, and Lindsey Graham. I mean, he's been there for almost 20 years now. And honestly, he is not that popular. Some people liked him before because it's very bipartisan. He got both Democrats and Republicans happy, but a lot of the people that voted for him are starting to shy away a little bit because he's been there for too long. And I think that generally speaking, the nation as a whole is going through a movement of get rid of the older people or the establishment people, drain the swamp, to quote some U.S. politicians, in this case Donald Trump. And I think honestly we're seeing that on both sides of the aisle. So Lindsey Graham's probably going to still win his race by 6 points, 8 points, 12 points. However, I think honestly it's going to be a lot closer than it should be for him. And honestly, although Jamie Harrison could probably provide a very, very good campaign challenge for Lindsey Graham, I honestly see the state of South Carolina being almost nearly safe for the Republicans when it comes to the Senate level. However, here's the thing why I say that. Polls and things like that, they show Lindsey Graham ahead by 5%. However, we must notice as well that if you're establishment and you're head of the party, I mean, that's why Mitch McConnell is getting so much money for his race, and I think Lindsey Graham will also get a large amount of money for his race because they're the top executives in the Republican Party. And if they lose their seats, it's going to be very embarrassing for the party as a whole. So they're heavily investing in those seats. So the polling data could have Jamie Harrison behind by only 5%. I think that still it could be anywhere between the 10 to 15% range for Lindsey Graham. So now that we talked about all the races except Georgia, let's actually talk about Georgia now. So Georgia is a race where I think it's a little bit more of the it's becoming the swing state, and it is. And I think at the senatorial level, at least for the statewide election, as the regular election that was scheduled for this election, I think it's still going to go to David Perdue, the current incumbent, for one major reason. Jon Ossoff, who is the Democratic challenger, yes, he could bring out the suburban Atlantan voters. He could bring out the voters in Macon, the voters in Savannah, the voters in these Democratic areas of Georgia. However, when it comes to appealing to some of the other voters, he just can't. And I mean, if African-American turnout is high, there might be a little bit more of room for error for Jon Ossoff. However, considering that David Perdue easily appeals to the moderate Republicans, which are a big group of voters the Democrats are going after in Georgia, I think at this point in time, it's going to be very difficult for Jon Ossoff to win. I think that David Perdue is going to win by around 5 to 6 points. So now that we talked about all the states that are going by a likely margin, let's move on to the Democratic lean states at this time. And I think at this point, there is 2 Democratic lean states in the states of North Carolina and the states of Maine. So right now, these 2 races are pretty much what's going to essentially do or break the Senate majority for the Democrats. They could win in North Carolina, Maine, and then one of the outlying states, perfect. They won the Senate by a 51 margin. And if they only win North Carolina and Maine, according to my prediction, they would just have to win the White House, which right now it's looking like they will, so they would have the majority. So now that we see this, why do I think these states are going blue? In North Carolina, we have a very good race that is being ran by Cal Cunningham, a state representative. He's raising very big amounts of money. Tom Tillis is being painted as this very unpopular, very bad figure in the state. And honestly, I think that the way the state is trending demographically is giving an edge to Cal Cunningham, he's not one of those politicians that can only appeal to one group of people. He could appeal to the liberals, he could appeal to the moderates, which are going to be crucial if the Democrats want to win the Senate seat, which essentially would give them the pathway to winning the whole Senate elections. And honestly, Tom Tillis isn't doing too great here. And Cal Cunningham has just a huge lead over him when it comes to fundraising. And in polls, you're seeing him lead by 2 to 3%, which I think that's where the race is going to fall, 2 to 3%. While in Maine, we have a very interesting thing. So this seat is currently held by once the most popular senator in the United States, with Suzanne Collins, but she's had a very bad political fallout. She started to vote more with Trump, which a lot of her constituents like her because she was a very bipartisan person. That kind of went out the window, I would say, right after Kavanaugh votes and all of that. So she started to go more with the Republican Party. So she's now one of the most unpopular senators. So she went from being number 1 to number 97, which that is not a great look for Suzanne Collins. And on the other side, you have Sarah Gideon, who is a young, charismatic candidate who currently is the Speaker of the House of Representatives in the state of Maine, who's running a very strong campaign, raising lots of money against Suzanne Collins. So I think honestly at this point, that's one of the races that really is going to define the victory for the Democrats. And I think at this point, Suzanne Collins has nothing much for her. It's going to be like a best case scenario where she wins for the Republicans. But I think currently Sarah Giddings is running a strong campaign, which I would say puts the race in her column. Now, going on to the one race, which I think is going to fall in the lean margin for the Republicans, is the state of Georgia's special Senate election. So this race is between four major people. We have Raphael Warnock, Matt Lieberman on the Democratic side, and Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins on the Republican side. So what's going on here? We have a jungle primary on election day, and then there's going to be a runoff. So currently, if we look at latest polling, we have Loeffler and Collins leading in polls, with Lieberman and Warnock pretty much neck and neck. So there's like a very small difference. So the top two vote getters will go on to the runoff, which I think at this point, it depends. If the Republicans do good in Georgia, they might get the two Republican candidates in Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler. But if they get someone like or if Raphael Warnock or Matt Lieberman gets over the amount of votes that over one of the Republicans, they're probably going to go to one of them is going to go to the general election, I guess, for the runoff. So right now, the two favorites are Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins. But if there is a Democrat and a Republican, I would say it would be Raphael Warnock and Doug Collins at this point. I would give the victory to Doug Collins in the runoff because he is somewhat popular. He appeals to the rural voters in Georgia, and he appeals to the moderate Republicans. Well, Raphael Warnock, he's not known very well nationwide. Again, as we run a statewide campaign, you get known by the people. However, I think that's going to be a problem for him since Doug Collins is very well known. And honestly, the Democrats are not looking too much into flipping Georgia, which if they invested a lot of money into it, they could definitely do. So those are all the lean states for both the Democrats and the Republicans. And now let's talk about the last two Senate races that I will categorize at this time, those being the state of Montana and the state of Iowa. Right now, I think in the state of Montana, we have Steve Bullock, the Democrat. He's leading, and I think he will win come November. I think he has a lot of support. He has very strong polling numbers. He's going against Steve Daines, incumbent senator. And we have a very, very, very common or similar, I guess, scenario to what we're seeing in the state of Colorado. We are seeing a very popular governor, or in case of Colorado, former governor, running against a man not so known incumbent. Steve Daines is that man not so known incumbent, which really realistically is going to be a burden for his campaign. I think honestly at this point, since Steve Bullock is so popular, he could win here. And we're seeing a big Democratic movement in statewide races in Montana, not at a presidential level, but Senate, governor, and even House races. We certainly are. So I think like right now, Steve Bullock has a very good chance of winning there. And he's running a very good campaign with a lot of fundraising. And this is one of the races where a lot of money is being spent. And the state of Iowa, the last state, I think is currently leaning or tilting towards Joni Ernst, where I think the incumbent senator will defeat challenger Teresa Greenfield. I think, honestly, Joni Ernst is a very good candidate, especially for Iowa. And I think at this point in time, she has a pretty solid chance of victory there. And looking off of who's voting in Iowa, we have a lot of white rural voters. And of course, there is somewhat of a Democratic movement, at least when the wave happened in 2018, where we have people like Abby Finkenauer that were elected to somewhat rural districts in Iowa. So the Democrats could definitely appeal to the rural voters. However, I think Joni Ernst does a lot better at that, as well as appealing to the suburban white voters and actually some more minorities as well. As there's a big movement for minorities for the Republicans. Joni Ernst could really do that, and I think, honestly, Teresa Greenfield could probably come close, but I think it's going to tilt towards Joni Ernst in the Iowa Senate race. So that is my prediction for the United States Senate. 49 Republicans to 51 Democrats. And yeah, so guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. Hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.